Welcome to episode number 18 of Social Selling for Newbies. I'm Tom Burton. I'm here with my co-host Carson and Brandon and two really cool special guests today, Morgan and Nicholas. Welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here.
Hey, I just got a
thanks
connection
for having
request
us.
from Morgan.
You're welcome.
Really?
Morgan, we were
What is he-
we were
We
connected
started.
before.
What is he, social
my
prospecting?
Yeah, something like
Look at
that.
that.
Do you want to send him
Are you
another
gonna
message,
Are you going
Nicholas?
to pitch
saying-
slap me now?
Yeah, you're going to ask him for a 15-minute demo?
No, my favorite is
Yeah.
I'm going to ask what his priorities are for 2023. Because
No, Morgan, it's what keeps you up at night?
What
Hey,
keeps
what's
you up
wrong
at
with
night?
that?
You're right.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Actually, my favorite is just bumping this back up to the top, which
Checking
is code
in,
for
Following up.
yeah.
Well,
I'm going to make you
my,
delete yet another message from me.
Yeah.
my birthday was last week, and I got quite a few happy birthday messages from people I didn't know. A couple of them I said thank you, and it came right back with a pitch slap. I was like, man, that's really
You mean that's
Happy
not what
belated,
you wanted for your birthday,
no
Tom?
strings attached.
You get a free demo
Oh.
at your birthday
right.
gift from me.
that's right. They
Correct.
sent me a free certificate for a 15-minute discovery call. It was great. So anyway, we're going to be talking, speaking of this, about modern social prospecting today. And Isabella, welcome. Andre, welcome. We definitely have some people starting to jump in on the chat. And please feel free to jump in with questions, because I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversation today. Before we start, so Nicholas and Morgan, one of the things we've started to do on this show is define a bit what we mean by social selling, because we've had all these different questions about what do you mean by social selling and what it is. So we came up with this definition. I think it's a little bit long, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So social selling consists of specific strategies and techniques that leverage social and digital channels to create and develop strong relationships with prospects, partners, and customers that ultimately lead to business-related transactions. All right, everybody repeat that now.
Yeah.
There's a
not
gift
an
card
exam,
coming in the mail or a free
I was
I say
demo.
that every night
Yeah.
to myself before I go to bed.
Yeah.
Right after
So-
my
Good recitation.
That's our official definition, so that people don't confuse social selling with pitch slapping or free happy birthday demos. That's what we're trying to do there. So hopefully that sets the stage, and let's jump in with some of these more. And Brandon, why don't you kick us off, because I know this is really your area of expertise, as what you consider to be modern social prospecting. And then let's let these young guys, help us understand a bit better what that really means.
Oh, sure. Set me up to talk, and then let Nicholas and Morgan come in behind me and go, no, that's not it. You're totally wrong.
That's
Appreciate
what I was
that, Tom.
expecting. Yeah, that's Carson might say that too.
Yeah. That's all good. So let's see, Kenny and everyone else, Injira and Isabel and Andre, thanks for coming. And yeah, I'll take a shot at this. Hey, look, I think quite simply, prospecting has always been activities that introduce and create a first conversation. So I think social prospecting is the process of using your social media account as a channel, as a medium, if you will, in order to introduce and get to know and create. For me, it's always about creating that first conversation, which, by the way, is not a sales conversation. It is a first conversation. So that's the way I would do it, very, very simply and to the point. Now, Morgan and Nicholas, I'm ready. Go ahead. Tell me what's wrong.
Morgan, your
Beat me up.
definition, I love. Trust at
What is
scale.
my- Oh, I was like, what is my definition? Putting me on the spot here. Yeah, I think the not so secret is that my background's in marketing, and I did brand strategy work for a long time. And so Nick often likes to poke fun at me when we talk with sellers and sales teams, because, prospecting is traditionally a sales motion. But I've always thought about social as a way to build trust and credibility at scale. I think
Mhm.
one of the things sellers are really good at as a result of their training as a result of the industry and like traditional sales, emails, phone calls, etc., is that the one-on-one conversation feels the most natural. And that can still happen on social, right? As Brandon, you just outlined, it's a great way to hop into somebody's DMs, to have a conversation in the comments, and really build that credibility at an individual level. But the outsized leverage I think an individual can have on social is you can also do it at scale through the same techniques that you do to reach people one on one. You have the algorithm supporting your comments and your engagement as much as supporting you connecting with that individual. And it's not like it doesn't get talked about, but I think for when you consider opening up those conversations, it's not always just about the person you're commenting on or engaging with. It's about everybody else who's looking at your engagement too.
Whew.
Well, all right, Nicholas, you're up.
Mic drop, game over. Is that what we're doing? We were speechless there.
Brandon, why
When
don't you just
Morgan
go ahead and
first told
sign
me
off?
that-
We'll keep going.
When Morgan first told me, I thought it was brilliant, and then I realized on the flip side, that's social selling done well. And I think where this really falls apart is how companies are building their lists. And why I put these two together is prospecting is almost treating people that they're guilty until proven innocent. That's not the point of prospecting, social prospecting. Prospecting is just research and action. So you don't need to book a meeting. You don't need to do all these things that we used to, because we can talk without having to sit face to face now. But the thing is, every interaction, we should get a little smarter about this account so that we're building that value, that hypothesis, taking that trust that Morgan had teed up and really driving it home with a deal worth doing. And I wish that if people looked at social selling and they looked at social prospecting as more of social research, I think it would just change the way people approach social altogether. And at the end of the day, there'd be less spam, there'd be better relationships, and there would be better deals. And I wouldn't cringe every time I get an email. We are the fastest growing, though.
You're speaking
Nicholas,
Carson's language there.
I don't know if you guys
when you say research, tell me a little bit more about that, or tell us a bit more about what when you say research, and what does that mean to you as it relates to the social prospecting motion?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. So just for fun, say I wanted to sell to Microsoft. And I looked at Microsoft and I said, that is a huge company. So why do I want to sell to a line of business? Do I want to sell to the entire organization? What competitive advantage and what value drivers am I bringing to the table that I think is going to move the dial enough that people are going to pay attention to me? So a lot of the time, what do we do with prospecting? It's not that. It's the opposite. What do? You spam until somebody picks up and you're like, pitch, 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 pitch. Because what got missed in most people's prospecting is the why change, why now? And they skip to the why you, because there was no legitimate reason for that company to be on your list in the first place. So what do? They default to the why you 1,000 times until somebody goes, yeah, maybe. But the research angle is completely different. You're playing detective. And this is what makes prospecting so much fun. And social made it so much easier because it's actually, people want to talk to you when you want to, show interest in them and you're curious. And that's why I look at it as research, because I have a hypothesis. So like, okay, well, Microsoft, well, traditionally they have an ecosystem play that they're selling everything to. Well, why would it make sense for them to social sell? What workflow changing? Well, if say social selling, I think it's going to go and play out on, Azure. And that's what I'm going to go after, because they need to go and get the information to the right people. So social selling is a listening play. Whose workflow am I interrupting? And you're really trying to go and map out what is the actual change management and the impact to that organization. And you're making a bunch of assumptions. So if I have a value hypothesis saying, if Microsoft buys social selling from Aligned, they're going to go and get X, Y, Z. I just made assumptions. I made assumptions about the problem, made assumptions about the solution, and I made assumptions about the implementation. I have to now go and research to see if that's true. And this is where it becomes very specific, and why you don't actually need to book a meeting to prospect is because I can go and sniff those out and do social listening. I can go and find influencers that I can go and have a conversation that they're already there. I can go where people are already learning, and I can go and see if their way they're seeing the world aligns with mine, because if it doesn't, we know what happens. You go into this company, you try to do good work, and they're like, no. And then you're out. And so would it have been better to disqualify? I think so.
Interesting. So Carson, what do you think? Would that work with Microsoft?
I can't speak to that. Nobody ever calls me to sell anything. But no, you know what? In all seriousness, I love how deeply Nicholas is thinking about this, because I think the problem in most social selling scenarios, and we've talked about this before with Brandon, is that I think people gravitate toward easy or lowest common denominator. They think if they're posting or they're friending people up or connecting, oh, I'm going to sell something here, and then when they don't, that's when they get the opinion that social selling doesn't work. The social platform is like the old networking event, the golf course, the coffee shop. Everybody's hanging out there, so we've got to be there. But if you show up and you do something stupid, or you walk up to people just trying to sell them stuff in a coffee shop, guess what's going to happen? It's not going to go well. Same thing happens on social. And that's why, we've got to make sure we utilize the information, the intel responsibly. We act accordingly, but you got to qualify quick. It's been painful for me in my years of sales leadership to watch people spend so much time prepping and trying to qualify something in advance before even talking to a customer. And, you go in and you spend like hours prepping just to hear a no, and then you give up and you move on. You've got to come in with an informed perspective, show up with value, and understand, like Nicholas said, how we're going to automatically connect the dots. How are we going to align? Have that plotted out, have that strategic. I'll say just in closing, to add to what Brandon said in our preamble, it's not only about creating that first touch point. You can also find ways to nurture the relationship along the way, because you can stay top of mind through your comments, your posts, and things of that nature. But also, like, to add to what Morgan said so eloquently, we're not only even working at scale, but you can utilize social. You can put social to work for you in so many ways. You can also do very focused things, very scaled things, but it's the perfect marriage of sales and marketing. And I think that's what you're going to see in our conversation today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing is we've got multi dimensions, right? We've got the dimension of looking at, the research, as you were saying, Nicholas, is okay. Well, understanding a bit more who I'm even talking to in the first place and why they would care, right? Then we have the actual channel or the communications that we're doing using that, whether that's one to many, Morgan, as you were saying, or one to one, or all of those. So the social prospecting idea or concept really has multi dimensions that kind of come together to make it all work. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk a lot about is, if you think of a seesaw between direct and indirect, the goal of social selling is to keep that seesaw in balance. Because if you only do indirect methods as the seller, you're only writing content and hoping people comment on your content, or you're commenting, comments kind of direct, kind of not. And you're only kind of passively engaging in the network. You're just trying to become an influencer. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That fits some people's go-to-market or marketing strategies. But for sellers who want to use social, like, you got a quota to hit, you need to generate some deals. So you also need that direct side of the seesaw. And that direct are more articulated outreaches and DMs and using comments to like identify conversations that are worth having. But the problem, is we were joking about at the top of the hour, is some sellers rely exclusively on direct methods. And that leads to the sort of spam landscape that we have, where even a birthday notice is an excuse to ask us for a demo. So keeping those things in balance is the main the main way social can be used properly, I think.
Well, I
Interesting.
like the way you phrase that, Morgan. It's I hadn't heard it said that way before with the balance, but it makes sense. Right? It's a rich medium, is what I think people need to understand. And there's a lot that we can do. We can do things at scale. We can do things one to one, and a lot of it is the quality of your approach or the quality of content that's going to determine whether a door can be open. And to Nick's point, the quality of the research you do determines the quality of the content and the way that you're making any sort of a conversation ask, however you want to phrase it. So I like that. And I do, guys, I want to bring to attention, and I'm sorry for whoever this is. It only says LinkedIn user on my end, but I think this is a really good question, especially for this group with Nick and Morgan and Carson and Tom. Do you all think that different prospect skills are required with different social selling approaches? Thank you for that. And by the way, if you want to put your name in there, I'd love to use your name and give you credit. I just can't see it.
It's a great question. I can kickstart this.
What do you think, Morgan? I always like to tease Morgan because one of my favorite things he told me lately is he thought he was a good marketer until he started selling. So I love to tee it up to go and see what he says and be like,
it's true.
Do I agree?
I think so kind of at a meta level, I think every seller has their own superpower. And that's something we shouldn't forget, right? Like, don't put me on the phones. I'm fine on a one-to-one conversation, but it's just not the medium that is my superpower. I'm much better at writing. I'm much better at email. So when it comes to social in particular, I think there are some sellers who are just going to be naturally better at using the platform. There's something that clicks in their brain that just makes it feel like magic, in the same way somebody who's really great on the phone makes it look easy. And when we're considering different approaches on the platform, I think that can even be, if we get more granular, I do think that there are maybe some specific different skills that make you better on some different approaches. Like, for example, one of the plays that we have is that we like to talk with sellers about is using comments as curiosity starters. So if somebody's complaining about something, somebody is posting about something, you're using a comment as a way to open a conversation in the comments, right? You're asking a question that's genuine curiosity. It's not pitch related. You're genuinely wanting to keep that conversation going. I think in part that's a muscle to build. But I also think that there are some sellers who are just naturally better at pulling up a comment thread, typing out a quick little question, and just developing that skill faster than other sellers who maybe are a lot better at developing really good content, something more indirect, right? Versus somebody who creates pain-based messaging that you're sending in a DM to a high-value prospect. So again, I still think like there's a seesaw to keep in balance here, no matter what approach you're using. But I do think some sellers will lean on some of their different skills depending upon their superpower and the approach that they favor to get in front of prospects. Nick, what do you think?
That's a fantastic answer. Because I think a lot of the time when we think of social selling or LinkedIn, it's one color. It's just, it's just blue. And so everybody's like, well, if I'm blue, then I should be on LinkedIn because I can do it better than anyone else. But just like sales, there's different flavors of sales that you're doing your outreach. Like we think of, before modern prospecting, people were networking, people were public speaking, they were going door to door. Like there were so many different ways that people were winning. And it's like, as soon as COVID hit, all of that just magically disappeared. And people are like, well, I just pitch slap on LinkedIn. That's how I win. And so I think it's really looking internally. Hopefully your team's doing this with you to see where you stand out. But no, like, are you a glue that holds groups together? Well, maybe an evangelism type, role would make more sense for you. Or if you're better at research, maybe you do more of an account-based, like mid-market enterprise strategic play, because you can really dive into that nitty-gritty that is required to stand out. But it's really knowing what you naturally do well and people recognize you for, and lean into that instead of trying to focus on all the other stuff that you could do better. And I think that's where sales and marketing really dropped the ball. And this is where sales management and enablement can really be there to make this work.
This is a really great question. And I love the answers that Morgan and Nicholas have had. When I think about this, just different prospecting skills required with different social selling approaches, I look at it kind of like a golf bag. I mean, you've got all these clubs, everybody hits clubs differently. Everybody uses different clubs for different things. We've got all these mediums, right? We've got all these different mechanisms by which we can go out and create meaningful relationships, get meetings, and nurture the relationship along the way. And so I think that's the key element, right? I mean, we've got to think about, we've all got that, my friend Bill Kirst likes to say, we've got this, every outreach has a bid to connect. And so, I think that's what it's all about, is any of these things that we use with a bid to connect, we can be successful. Morgan was talking about we all have our different superpowers. And I love that, because I think that's what we're all going to inherently bring. We've got to gravitate towards which of these tools are going to bring out our strengths, which of these approaches are going to bring out our strengths. I always tell people, your social selling approach is going to look different than mine. I don't expect you to do exactly the things that I'm doing, but I want you to be aware of all the mediums that are at your disposal, and you're going to gravitate toward what works well. And then Nicholas said something that just really stood out to me. You guys are saying a lot of brilliant nuggets here today, so I want to double down on them. We're like detectives. I react and respond to intel, to activity. I see that there's M&A. I see that there's a new executive, and I'm going to jump all over that. But I'm going to do it in a way that is exponentially greater than a lot of prospectors. I may reach out to 20 people because I saw that there was one new executive, just to get all of the intel, instead of just reaching out to that one person. Gives me a better probability of getting the meeting. If I find out that there's a partner that's engaged with a customer that has a better relationship than I do, I'm all over that. I'm going to go out and try to meet every single person. I've reached out to every person I know at that partner, trying to get a meeting and figure out, okay, how can I help you do better work there, so that if I help you win, guess what? Everybody's going to win. And lastly, I was closing a deal once upon a time that I had spent over a year on with my team. It was the end of the year. It was the last day of the year, and everybody was off. Everybody was out of the office. I was in panic mode because we were like right here in negotiations. And so what did I do? I used LinkedIn. I reached out to everybody that I could at the customer and at the partner that we were working with to get that we needed approvals with. And I reached out to all of them, messaged them, here's a Teams bridge. We're going to jump on and have a meeting. And I sent it out to maybe 30 people. I got 7 on this thing. And we ended up getting the deal signed at the last minute, got the big award for the team. But the bottom line is that these are tools that you use to make you more effective. How you use them is going to be personal to you.
Yes, well said.
So this kind of brings me to one of the next questions I wanted to make sure we covered today. And I think I love the idea of different superpowers and everybody looking at things differently. But what do you all think about if I'm going to do social selling and social prospecting, what mindset do I need to bring to the table? Regardless of what my superpower is, what mindset do I need to bring to the table? So
it's such if you don't mind me just jumping in on this.
Yeah.
I think
Go for it.
the mistake I think I see most sellers make is that they believe LinkedIn is a sales platform. And we have to remember it is a social media platform.
I gotta look the poor.
Yeah.
It's a social media platform, Brandon.
Right. Like when we view LinkedIn as a sales platform, we turn it into a transactional environment. So we hunt down prospects. We ask them quickly for meetings. We're basically just going as far and as wide as possible to see who can get that meeting the quickest. And in some channels, in some moments in traditional sales, maybe that's the appropriate approach. But I have never seen that work in a sustainable fashion for any company or any sales team on social. It's a social media platform. We're supposed to build relationships. So the mindset is, I'm showing up not because I have something to sell. That's true. I think almost everybody on LinkedIn has something to sell or something they could sell, right? Could be a side hustle, could be the company they work for, could be their own consulting guy. It's a big professional network. It's like any networking gig. But if you, Nick has this wonderful phrase: if you drive by business card people at a networking event and you just, start passing out your business card, everybody's going to be like, who's this guy? What? Why am I? No, I'm not going to deal with him. That's the same thing when we think of LinkedIn as a sales platform. We have this, I don't want to steal any thunder from you, Nick, but we have this rule called vampire sales. And when we started obeying,
you teed me up. Okay, whatever. You say it then.
When we implemented this rule, it transformed everything about the way we engaged. And it's a mindset rule. And the reason it's called vampire sales is that in folklore, vampires were not allowed into your home unless if they were invited in. And so the rule is you're not allowed to pitch unless if you're invited to. So everything about my engagement strategy is getting to know the other person in a genuine fashion. I'm not allowed to pitch, right? I don't want to. Carson, tell me more about what's going on at Microsoft. Hey, did you see this piece of news about this biotech company? Have you worked with them before? I saw one of your sellers was liking a lot of their stuff, so I imagine they're a client. How's that going? Leaning in so hard into that relationship, because at some point, Carson will turn around and be like, all right, so what do you do? And that's the vampire sales in action. So that's the mindset that I have.
I think just to kind of back up vampire sales, where that actually came from was watching people at networking events and really thinking of what it meant to be social before social media was a thing. What did it actually mean to be social? And so a lot of what my prospecting strategy was to go to local networking events because I sold a product that I had to serve a local market. And I wasted so much time going to networking events and going nowhere. So I was looking at my goals and I'm like, okay, so is this even worth doing anymore? And so I started doing a win-loss analysis and looking at what happened. And a very big pattern jumped out. The only people that ever bought from me were the ones that asked me, so what do you do? Because I waited and I leaned in to be interested in them and ask questions and just be present in that conversation, that when they did that flip, which is so critical, which most sellers miss, is the flip where you go from the seller to the advisor. It's an earned right to pitch.
Yes.
And so as soon as that flip happens, it opened the door to a deeper conversation where I could do discovery or I could have fun. That trust was now open and it went somewhere. They were willing to introduce me to people. There was referrals, but that flip never happened before. Therefore, it never went anywhere. And I think that's what happens a lot with people talking about, well, LinkedIn's a waste of time. All I do is I talk. Yeah, you talk, but you're not proving that you're the senior advisor, that you're an asset to their team. You're just a vendor. And as long as you're just a vendor, you're just going to be pitching in the DMs.
Doesn't that tie in, Brandon, to your circle of trust really well?
It does. And Nick, I love that. I've never heard the term vampire approach or vampire. What do you call it? Vampire
sales.
Rule.
Mm-hmm.
Your rule. But I do, and actually wrote an article about this a little while ago. The second company that I built, we had a no pitch rule, and we grew. And this is 2002 through 2007. We grew to 18 million in revenue without selling. It was all about, we went to a lot of trade shows and we had a lot of conversations, but everything was, everybody had 5 questions. We called them our back pocket questions, so you could pull them out. And they were specific to the person, but they were designed about the space and about the people we were talking to. And it was ask questions until they give you the right to pitch, which was, so what do you guys do? And I love the way you said it, Nick. You moved from being seen as a sales rep to being seen as an advisor. And it was game over at that point. And the referrals, the renewal rates, we just kept stacking things on top of each other. And the fun part about that for me is I didn't realize how good our program was it just kind of like we were doing it, and it kept getting good. And then some people would ask me questions about what do you do? And I was just like, oh, well, yeah, and I didn't realize how many people didn't do that. And that was really the secret sauce to that company's success. Of course, until the private equity group bought it and ruined it all, but that's a whole nother story for a different episode.
But what I'm
They have a
hearing on
tendency
this,
to do that.
on the mindset here is if you go into quote unquote social selling with the objective of building the relationship and getting that flip that you're talking about, where you become the trusted advisor, and you're not going in from I'm trying to make a transaction, just that mindset, which is, Brandon, I think what you were saying, just from what you were doing at networking, right? You weren't going in to do a transaction. You were going in to, be looked at as a trusted advisor or build that trust to do that. That's a very different mindset shift. And it's interesting. You're seeing more and more companies hiring salespeople from customer service, customer success, that have
Smart.
that
Engineering.
subject engineers, right? Subject matter expertise. Guess what? Who makes the best advisors are the people who really understand the business. So, go figure.
And I think,
Mhm.
and I think that relates to Brandon's question on here. I'm going to pull it up because that would be my answer. I think, the biggest struggle with social selling right now is mindset. And I think, Morgan, you said it. People see LinkedIn as a sales platform versus a social and a networking platform. And so they do two things with that. One is they feel like they need to be all buttoned up and robotic. And number two, everybody they talk to is a pitch. And that can't be further from what I've seen is most successful. And so mindset of being a giver, and you're never going to be seen as a trusted advisor unless you actually give trusted advice. And people just don't know how to do it. You got to flip that switch and be okay and trust. There's enough people like Carson out there that have built careers and have done extremely well just by being a mindset of serving and giving value.
I have a slightly different answer to Brandon's. I mean, we're all in the same vein here, I think, today. The biggest struggle, I think, in social selling is building credibility. And I think
Ooh.
it's very easy to confuse attention with credibility on a social media platform, because it's like, oh, he has 10,000 followers, or she has 25,000 followers. She gets so many likes on her posts. Of course she's credible, right? And that's furthest from the truth, actually. Every sales team we've worked with and every seller we've worked with rarely has more than 1,000 connections when they start, or less, honestly. And yet they can put social at their disposal because they're building credibility. And credibility is basically 4 questions, which is, can I trust you? Are you a good person? Can you actually solve my problems? And are you as good as you say you are? Right? So the last 2 we focus on a lot as sellers, right? Capabilities and results. But it's those first 2, earning the trust and showing up with good intentions, is really where the magic happens in credibility. Because if you've nailed that, you have so much buffer. Like, I think about this as fragility almost. How fragile is the relationship? Can I make a mistake? Can I say something wrong? Can I stumble over my words? Is that going to end the call, end the conversation because they don't have any interest? Well, if I have credibility because they trust me, they think I'm showing up with good intentions, and maybe the capabilities, results, things are up in the air, I have a lot more room for error. The relationship is less fragile. So I think just credibility is being built by showing up and adopting the mindsets that we talked to. Brandon, the examples that you brought up are perfect in this regard, where we're not pitching until we're asked, and we're also investing real time, real curiosity in other people's lives, both in their work and their personal lives. That's where credibility really happens.
I'd be curious to ask everyone here what their thought is. So you get past this hump of the first bit of social selling. The 2 most common things that come up after this, and I'll tell you, I definitely struggle with one of these more than the other, but finding conversations worth having and navigating that conversation after you start it are the two most common things I see sellers fall apart on. So they're just showing up in prospect's door and saying, "Hey, dinner ready?" And they're going, why are you here? Or they're just but actually just, yeah, what do you guys think? What do you think is the hardest part? Finding conversations worth having or continuing that conversation after you start it?
I'll take a shot at that. Carson, Tom, I've been talking too much.
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think it really depends. I mean, I read that question, what's your biggest struggle in social selling? And frankly, I think it's just the changing landscape. You have to constantly evolve. So sometimes, Nicholas, it may very well be the going out and finding the conversation. I can't find the people that want to talk about what I think they want to talk about, or what they want to talk about shifts based on changes in the industry, changes in the environment, the climate. But that's why it's all the more important to go back to what Nicholas said before, to do your detective work and make sure you're at the pulse of what they want to talk about. And guess what? We can do that by looking at their posts. What are they talking about? What are they sharing? Because guess what? Those are the types of things that they probably want to hear a valuable point of view and perspective about, and they'll take a meeting with. So I think it's just the shifts and the evolution, also the evolution of tools. There's so many different, platforms that we can leverage, different tools that we can utilize. And it's like figuring out, okay, what's valuable? What should I assimilate into my arsenal and what shouldn't I? And then how do I maintain consistency? That's another big struggle that I have with social selling. It's just consistency of execution over time. I wish I had more time to prospect, and I try to block out time to go out and do it. Some days I'm really disciplined about it. Other days I'm not. And then I guess the last piece would be that continued nurturing. It's really easy. A lot of times in sales, we get great momentum around something and then we get batted back down. You may have a great rapport, somebody that you developed a phenomenal relationship with on social, and then they retire or they go to another company. And guess what? Now it's all the more important that we've developed a groundswell of social relationships at that organization. That's why you don't just double down on one person. You've got to make sure you've got a lot of different relationships that have stemmed from social, so that you're not, somebody leaves, it's actually a multiplier scenario, because now you're going to be working with their new company and in addition to the one that you're already working with. So I think that's the key struggle for me, is making sure I'm consistent, making sure I'm on top of all the tools, and making sure I'm at the pulse of what really matters to my customers all the time.
Well said. What do you think, Tom?
So, I can't add any more to that, to what everybody said. I think that's exactly right on. But I wanted to hit one more question before we run out of time today. And it kind of ties what you were just saying, Carson, about tools. And what are your guys' thoughts as it relates to, and we're talking more social prospecting. You obviously hear a lot about AI right now and the whole chat GPT and all that. How do you see that fitting in, or AI in general, if we look ahead in the next year or two, and the social, and how will that make it easier? Will it ruin it? Well, what's your take on all of it?
I can't remember who said it earlier. I think it was Carson, that people are going to default to easy and miss the whole point. So what are they going to do? The same thing. They go in my DMs all the time. What is the message I should be sending? Why that account? Why them? Well, I don't know. They're big. And so what? That's what it is to you. What's it to them? And so they're going to default to just writing messaging at scale. But I think where GTP3 is really going to stand out is contextual based lists to have a reason to reach out. And I don't know if we'll ever quite automate respectfully that first message, but I see it for the level of research we can do in a way that is actually meaningful to someone that wants to do the research, that it can just save them so much time and tee things up so that they can focus really on those one-to-one activities that really validate or refine that research. But I could just see it going to messaging and going nowhere, or content, the post and ghost.
Yeah. I think I've just real quick, I think I've sort of not out of hand dismissed campaign-based approaches as like something useful to focus on as a consultancy, because I think over the next couple of years, most campaign-based sales will probably be automated 80 to 95%, because you can, right? If you're using the same frameworks that seem to work, and you can match up the economics of the campaign to the economics of the thing you're trying to sell, and you only need a certain number of bytes, and you can run the numbers, and you can make those bytes turn into qualified deals that then close at a certain percentage, then of course you are going to use Chat GPT to write your cold emails. Like there's no there's no question about it. But it's not going to replace, I don't think, what Nicholas was talking about, and Carson, you said it dead on, which is that if you're a strategic seller or you're doing account-based sales development, there is so much detail and relationship building and contextual putting dots together for your prospects and for buyers and for champions, that no matter how extensive the language learning model gets, it's not going to be able to replace the domain knowledge you have in your own brain, the knowledge you have about the account, the power dynamics in the account, whether the intuition you have if the person in front of you is actually the mobilizer or the champion for the deal, who on the buying committee is going to block this deal and what objections they have and how to navigate those objections. Like if you think even one step beyond prospecting, there's so much that a language learning model is not going to be able to handle. So I think campaigns will probably be impacted the most, messaging particularly, as Nick was saying, and God save us all when they infuse it into content in the feeds. I can't wait to scroll past 30 posts that all sort of are variations on the same theme. Yeah. It's already happening. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I think one good thing from it is going to be that people are going to start to have confidence in posting. The downside of it is because it's not going to be their thoughts and their content. It's going to be AI created content, and the echo chamber is just going to get really, really loud. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in there for people that are true thought leaders or really want to think and write and put it out there. I think there's a lot of opportunity there still for them because they will stand out.
Carson, any final take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you do to connect outside of just the posts, not chasing vanity stats. I mean, sure, I could have, AI help me write something, but it's not my genuine thoughts. But it's what I do outside of that, connecting meaningfully with folks, earning the right to be in their DMs, being invited to pitch and to offer. And, I think, look, AI is going to be a very powerful additional medium and mechanism to leverage. If it makes it more effective for me to be fed intel that I can react and respond to, all the better. But what I choose to do with it as a seller is what's truly going to make it sing. I'm a huge James Bond fan. Okay. Sean Connery will always be my favorite, but one of my favorite newer films is Skyfall. And I'm going to tell you, there's a scene where James Bond meets Q. Okay. And they sit down, they're talking about, they're looking at a painting, and it's about hauling an old warship off for scrap. And the dialogue back and forth is really around, Q being very young and all about innovation, Bond being old and becoming obsolete. That there's no longer a need for these agents in the field. And I actually wrote an article that's out on LinkedIn about how, comparing James Bond to the field agent seller, which makes me feel really noble in what I do every day. But I digress. The point of this is that you will always need the field agent, authentic seller. And here's why. The question that comes back is, if you can do all of this in your pajamas with your laptop sitting in your bedroom, why do you need me? And Q says, well, sometimes a trigger has to be pulled. And Bond says, or not pulled. You got to trust me to know the difference. And that's the key for the seller is all these things are going to continue to make us better and better, but it's all in how we choose to use it. We can't gravitate toward the lowest common denominator. AI can make us better. People are always going to use these tools irresponsibly, but frankly, I think that's what makes the greats shine all the brighter.
Well, yeah, that would be my take. I believe that AI and these other tools are actually going to elevate the need for that high quality trusted advisor. And
When you see this,
Don't want to let you down, Butch. Don't want to let you down, Butch.
well, did you know,
Moneyball.
Carson? You know, Carson, that Brandon was in those James Bond movies, right?
Yeah, you know what? He's in the gun barrel sequence. He's actually the stunt double that comes
Right.
out at the beginning of every movie and does the gun barrel.
Oh my!
Great.
Be an extra in one movie, and it comes up every episode.
No, but it's not just any movie, right? You know, it was
That's fair.
so.
The time
All right.
travel
Well,
classic.
in wrapping up, Morgan
Yep.
and Nicholas, take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about your podcast and where people can find you. And again, thanks for jumping in and joining us today. I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. You can check out the B2B Power Hour, b2bpowerhour.com. We talk a lot about sales and marketing alignment, getting teams to work together effectively. Social is obviously a focus of ours because that's where the magic happens. And please connect with us. Don't pitch slap us on our birthdays, I beg of you. But connect with us out on LinkedIn. Our names are pretty easy to find, but we got a nice gradient background on our photos in case you can't find us. And thanks, Rob, in the comments for tagging in the B2B Power Hour.
I just wanted to add one thing, and it was something that Carson highlighted really well. Sales and marketing is a tacit knowledge, meaning that it can't be easily explained in words. And so any advice you guys are getting on here, our podcast, or wherever else, knowledge and action is what makes wisdom. So find the people, emulate them until you understand it. Get there, get in, put yourself in the right places to learn through osmosis. Apprentice anytime you can, because just reading it isn't enough, especially in what we do. So thanks for investing, you guys, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again. This has
thanks.
been fun. All right,
You
everybody.
got it,
Well, thank
and
you.
thanks.
Thanks, Butch and Brandon and Rob and LinkedIn user and Dave and everybody who jumped in today. Always glad to have you, and be sure to check out the podcast. This comes up, will be up next week on the podcast. So check us out there. Leave a rating. Comment.
Real quick,
all that good stuff.
LinkedIn user is Kenny from Montreal. I want to throw his name out there.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Kenny, for all your questions and being there.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Until next
Thanks.
time, happy social self.